All right, tonight, I could take this intro. I could probably spend 30 minutes trying to introduce our speaker. I won't do that, but there's so many stories I want to tell, I got to figure out which ones are most important to you. Gary Slaughter is born and raised in Hughes Springs, Texas. Who knows where Hughes Springs is? If you blink, you're going to miss it when you drive through it. North of Longview, south of Texarkana, we're talking East Texas, Northeast Texas. He went to what was then called East Texas State University. What's that called today? Texas A&M Commerce. He and my wife are in school together. I think they dated, but they haven't admitted it yet. They were both there at East Texas, but they both had a common friend. His name was Harvey Banks Martin. Anybody know that name? How many Cowboy fans are here? Yeah. Harvey Banks Martin was an All-American at East Texas. He went on to star for the Cowboys. I'm pretty sure he's in the NFL Hall of Fame. He was one of the greatest defensive linemen to ever play for him. Well, he was Ann, my wife's enforcer, in the dorm where she was the resident assistant. Back when, you had rules. Girls lived in one dorm, boys lived in another. You remember that? Well, some of you don't, but I do. She was a resident assistant in a girl's dorm, and Harvey Banks Martin's girlfriend lived in her dorm. So at curfew time, Ann would go out and say, "Okay, girls, curfew. I'm shutting the door, everybody come in." And most of the girls, of course, some of them lingered. Some of the boyfriends are hanging around until this guy about 6'7" and about 280 goes, "You guys, you're out of here. You do what she says." Harvey was her enforcer. Well, Harvey was actually one of Gary's good friends. They were in FCA together. He's been with him throughout in his NFL career. Well, Gary went on, after he graduated, went into business up in Arkansas. Now, don't hold that against him, you Texans. You know how many Texans go to Arkansas to go to school? About half the University of Arkansas are Texans. You know why? They give us in-state tuition if you go to our University of Arkansas. So you got some young ones coming up. University of Arkansas, pretty good school. So Gary goes to Arkansas. That's where he meets his wife, Marla. He's in business. But he's also, as a side, he puts on zebra stripes. And he said, "I'll do a little refereeing, a little umpiring, a little officiating." I got to tell you, there's a joke between my wife and I for the last 47 years. If we need a little extra money, I go up my attic, I pull down the stripes, and I go referee or officiate or umpire. That was always my little side job. Not quite the level Gary went, though. He started out in high school. He went to college level. He's been with the Southwest Conference, which became the Big 12, and through a pretty serious selection process, got selected into the NFL. He's been with the NFL 30 years now. 30 years with the NFL. His primary job was head lineman. Terry Deppie understands. On the football field, you really pick a particular place, and that's where you specialize. Yeah, if you want to become a whiteout or referee, you'll eventually move up there, but a lot of them stay an umpire or a back judge or head linesman. Gary was a head linesman. He's been in 2 Super Bowls, at least 2. He then went into a supervisory role because the head of NFL officials says, "You're one of the best we've got. We need you helping, training, supervising others." So even though now today their son is an NFL official. So his son is following in his footsteps. Now the head of all officials goes, "We got a OCI, a conflict of interest issue here." Gary says, "I understand. My son steps in, I step out." No, you can't step out. You're too good, I need you. I'm going to figure out a role for you to have with us to keep helping us, and you won't supervise your son. I mean, that's what the issue had to be. So that's how good he is. They kept him on. He's still with the NFL. He's still chief of supervisors of all the NFL officials. He spends time in New York, spends time at home. He's been up and down the Midwest. He told me he has the Midwest. He doesn't describe states. He says, I'm from Minnesota to New Orleans. Everything has to do with NFL cities. See, that's how he thinks. Help me welcome to the Roundup stage, Mr. Gary Slaughter. Gary, come on up, please.
Thank you, Tex. Two things I'm not used to, and that's an introduction like that, and cheers. Cheers. If I ever had any cheers, the other half of the stadium was booing. So that's real natural for me, but I really appreciate having some cheers too. Even my own family, I always tell this story, and it's a true story, that when I moved from small college or mid-level college into the Southwest Conference, my very first conference game to work in the Southwest Conference was Texas Tech at Texas. And I didn't get to work like Texas playing Stephen F. Austin, not any knock on Stephen F. Austin or anybody like that, but it was a non-conference game. And Texas Tech was real good that year, and so was Texas. But my first game was there in Austin. And having worked small college games for the last several years, you work high school, small college. If you're good enough, they want you in the next level, then the next level, things like that, just like a player. So I took my whole family to that game because going to the University of Texas was a big deal, especially for me coming from small college. And they give our families some tickets at those games. So where did they give the tickets at the University of Texas? It was right on the 50-yard line, right on the Texas bench sideline, and about halfway up in the lower deck. So they're sitting right in the middle of the biggest burnt orange fans you can be in. The big donators, everybody. They're in the middle of it. And as fate would have it, I was a little worried about that, the fact that they're sitting right in the middle of all that. So I think there was about 85,000 at the game, which is even more now, but they've expanded the stadium. But that was way more than any game I'd ever been to in small college or mid-level college, maybe 15, 20,000 at the most. And there you are, about 85,000. And probably out of that, there were probably 80,000 Texas and about 5,000 Texas Tech that were there. Well, the game winds up being really, really close. Texas thought they were going to beat them, but it's real close. And at the end, Tech is making a drive to win the game, to try to. And Texas had sacked their quarterback twice in a row, 3 times in a row, and now it's 4th down and forever to go. So it's coming down to this one play. They throw a pass over the middle, and where I am is on the line of scrimmage, and I'd move downfield with the plays. So we've got our 3 deep officials who are all veterans that had probably been calling 15 to 20 years in the league. And this Tech kid goes probably about that far past the first down marker, which was nearly 30 yards downfield, and makes a catch, but it's low to the ground. And our 3 deep officials come in selling it real hard. Incomplete, incomplete, incomplete. The Texas fans are going crazy. They're off the hook, they think. And then this one rookie guy, who was me, sees it from a different angle. Even though it was far away, I could see that he got his hands under it. And I was sure, I had no doubt. But 3 guys that were closer, but with not as good angle as I had already ruled it incomplete. And I was always taught that you've got to stand up. When it's time to stand up and you know what it is and it's not favorable, no matter where it is, you got to step up and make the call. So I ran in and I get the guys together, and there's a lot of experience there with those 3 guys. And I had to tell them, they looked at me like I was out of my mind when I said it was caught. And I said, it didn't skip off the ground, it skipped off his fingers and popped up, but he caught it. And he's just far enough for a first down. And so they looked at me and said, boy, you better be right, or this is your first and last game to ever work in the Southwest Conference, especially at Texas. And I said, well, fellas, if I wasn't sure, I wouldn't even question this. I said, okay, we'll do it. So they reversed the call. This is way before replay. They reversed the call, and that place went nuts. Tech goes down, scores, wins the game. And I'd never been in an environment like that where there's so much heat on you and you alone, not just the crew, but focused on you, because everybody knew you were the one that changed it. And I've got, I don't know if there was Texas State troopers around me as we're running off the field, but I was surrounded by these troopers that were guarding me as we went off the field. And I never had that. Even our local cop never guarded me when I was working high school games or anything. But surrounded by these guys, and then I got to the locker room, and we would go straight in, get in the car with a police escort, take us straight to the hotel immediately. We're out of the stadium in an instant. But my family is sitting right in the middle of all these Texas big-time donors and fans. And I got back to the hotel quickly. It's going to take a while for them to get there, and I'm worried about them. I'm really worried about them. I thought, God, what are they going to do? It was obvious, and they're sitting right there. I got concerned. And finally, they show up probably half an hour or 45 minutes later at the hotel. And the first thing I want to go to is, how'd that go for y'all? Because it was a little while before the end of the very end of it. So I knew they were sitting in right in the middle of it. I said, what did y'all do? Because I've never been booed like that where the hair on the back of my neck stood up like it did. And I looked at them and right in the face and said, oh, it wasn't a problem. I said, what do you mean it wasn't a problem? He said, oh, we booed right along with all of them. Said, we looked down on the field, man, you had a police escorting you out of there. We're going out on our own. There's no way in the world that we would. So we just booed, man. We booed. Sorry about that, but we got to survive, you know. So cheering is good. Now I want to introduce my wife, Marla, because kind of what I'm going to talk about tonight is the football, of course, because I know that's really part of what you came to hear about the NFL and all that. But I'm going to cover that. But it's family. My family means the world to me, not only just because of football, because if it wasn't for them, there's no way I could have done the things that I've done, especially for as long as my career's been, 50 years or so. Now it's hard to believe. But Marla is one of my biggest supporters most of the time, every once in a while. But honey, would you stand up? No, come on, stand up. Now I've got to tell you, Marla was quite an athlete herself. In eastern Arkansas, where we met, Marla was a basketball player, and she was a gunner. I don't know if she ever passed the ball at all, but she could shoot, and that's before they even had a three-point line. They beat a team one night that was trying to hold them down because she was the big scorer, and the score wound up being 48-46, and her team won. She scored 44 out of the 48 points. My grandsons, even now, y'all know what it is to play horse or donkey, where you go out there and you shoot, and if you miss, you count the letters. They won't play with her out in the back because they get beat by her, because she can stand out there and gun it from anywhere. But she's also a math teacher. And when we moved to Texas, she took over. She taught math in Arkansas and had great scores and all this. She moves to Allen. When I came off the field and became a full-time supervisor, we moved to Dallas area. They wanted me kind of right in the middle of the country. And she starts teaching math in Allen. And immediately, she's used to teaching country kids, you know. So immediately, she's got the top 3%. She's in the top 3% of the math grades in the whole state of Texas, And I said, well, you can't repeat that. So every year, she was always in the top 3% of the state of Texas with her math grades and everything. So she's not just cute, she's an athlete, and she's smart. So, but in my career, she's done some things that have been unusual. I remember one game that I had, and And I like to, when I'd come in and have to wash and do all my uniform and everything, and repack, you can't go get one of these uniforms at any athletic store. Even though there may be people walking around in those striped shirts in the store selling, you can't get an NFL uniform anywhere other than from the NFL, because it's got your letter on it, your number. I was number 30, so I was always number 30 when I was in the league. There was no other number 30, and I'd have HL for headlinesman, and so I'm that guy for my whole career. So I never wanted to go somewhere and get there without those unique socks. This one we wore those real cute little white knickers that look so bad. Look so bad looking. But the hat, the whole 9 yards, I'd wash it to make sure I got it all back in the bag, and I was ready to go for the next week. It'd be the first thing I did when I came in. Well, you're putting that back in an athletic bag that the NFL had made for us to fit in the overhead and all that stuff, just great. And I'd put all my stuff in it, including my shoes, whichever sponsor of the shoes it is, like it's Nike now. We had to wear those shoes as a surprise for us. I put it all back in the bag, so I knew I had it. So if I got called on an emergency to work a different game or something, I'd already have everything packed. Well, she decided to help me, and the reason I didn't want her to ever touch it is because if I got to that city and left anything, my cap, forgot to put it in there, shine my shoes, and I forgot to put them in there, anything like that, I didn't want it to be on her. It'd be my fault for it not being there. But she decided she wanted to help me, because sometimes later in the season they get bagged with that stuff packed in, it get a little gamey, like a little locker room smell to it. So she got the big idea without telling me that as soon as I washed it, reloaded it, and everything for Monday, for the game for the next Sunday, that she decided it should make it smell better and everything. So she puts dryer sheets all in my bag, in between everything. And these dryer sheets, especially the older ones, had a real strong smell to it. And she, I think, got these, were probably cheap ones at Walmart that were Mountain Meadow, Stinky Flower, whatever they were called. But it smelled like a funeral home. The flowers had been there way too long. Well, she put it between everything. She put it in my shoes. She put it in my hat. She put it, there must have been 100 of them in that bag. And it sat there for 7 days. And my game that week was Baltimore playing at Pittsburgh. And they're tied for the conference lead. We're in the middle of the summer, and it's at Pittsburgh. And I hadn't opened that bag all week. So I get there, and I get in the locker room and open that bag. And everybody in the locker room says, "What in the world is that? What in the world is that?" And it was a sickening smell. You could tell there was some kind of flower in there, but you didn't know what it was. I put the uniform on. I think it's going to air out. But it was like today. It was unseasonably warm today. It's unseasonably warm at Pittsburgh. But those two teams with Jerome Bettis as the running back for Pittsburgh and Ray Lewis, best linebacker in the league for Baltimore, the league had given us notice this is going to be real physical. I want you guys, try not to throw a bunch of unnecessary roughness calls. Try to work this game without a bunch of 15-yard penalties for all that other stuff. Let's let them play. It's the big game on TV this weekend. So try to do that without fouls unless they fight. So we're just told by the commissioner himself, go in and break them up as much as possible. Well, I go out there and I don't air out any. It probably, as you start sweating, it's probably even worse. So it gets, that smell is making me nauseous and everything. And the Pittsburgh coach comes up to me in between plays once, Bill Cowher, and I'd always told Bill, when you want to say something to me, tell me when they're in the huddle or tell me when I got a little more time. Don't wait till they're coming up to the line and get in my ear asking me something, because I got to really be focused on everything. And I noticed that he always had a play sheet in his hand, and he always walked right behind me. I was always on the sideline, so I'm right in front of the head coaches all the time. I'm the main guy they're talking to all the time. It doesn't matter if I did it or anybody else did it, they're talking to me. So that was one of the things I actually enjoyed the most, was dealing with those A-type personality coaches and working with them was one of my favorite things. And Bill stops right behind me. He knew I was from Arkansas, knew I lived in Arkansas. He joked with me about that all the time, and my accent. And Texas, Arkansas, it's all about the same. And he's right here. And then I suddenly noticed, I just was watching them line up, and I said, Bill, if you need anything, you can't say it right now. And he gets right up in my ear, and I hear him breathe in, real like that. And he breathes in real deep, real deep. And I said, what is he doing? And he gets right up in my ear, and he said, you buy that cologne by the gallon at Walmart? And he's dead serious. And I said, no, I know what you're smelling, and it's a long story. And he said, well, just tell me what the name of it is. I want to make sure my wife never buys me any of that. Well, as the game goes on, they start getting into it. Ray Lewis and Jerome Bettis, they meet just like two locomotives in the middle of the line, and they just crush it. And it would have killed a normal human being to be in that collision. And they get up and they're rooster fighting, chest out, rooster fighting each other, and I have to go in to try to break it up. And now it starts, both teams are coming in. All the players are coming in. And I get right in the middle of it trying to push them apart. And as I'm doing it, they're crushing me because one reaches around and grabs the other one by the face mask, and the other one reaches around the back of my head and grabs his face mask. So I'm trapped between them. The other players are coming in, and I can feel my ribs start to pop, and I'm getting kind of crushed. And I'm telling them, we're not putting up with this, and I'm laying the law down to them. And now these other players are there, and suddenly one of them says, what is that smell? What is that smell? And one of them reaches down, one of the guys, and grabs my sleeve and pulls it up. It said, it's the ref. It's the ref. And I said, don't worry about how I smell. Y'all stop all this nonsense. Stop it. And they said, hey, dude, they just all back up. Say, just don't touch us, don't get close to us, and we will behave ourselves. So, honest to God, the rest of the game, anytime any players got to, because I'm sure it spread, number 30 smells something. If I started toward players to break them up and they saw me, they'd just say, hey, we quit. Just don't touch us. Don't rub off on us. Don't touch us. So I get home and I tell her, honey, please don't ever mess with my bag anymore. But I got to admit, you made the game really easy for me today because I was able to control everything without having to throw flags, and you were the reason. One of my other favorite stories about her is when my son Tab, that Tex mentioned, is in the NFL now and has just finished his 4th year as an umpire. So he's the guy that deals with all those big linemen on the offense and defense and all that. They just got married. He married a girl from Missouri, and they were just out of college. And this is when the Rams were playing in St. Louis. Kurt Warner was there. The Rams were going to the Super Bowl, all that kind of stuff at that time. And all her family was from Missouri. And we didn't know them. We just met them at the wedding, really getting to know them. And Erica, Tab's wife, has her mother's the same age as Marla, and then she has a sister that's like 1 year younger. And I told him, I said, if I ever have a game in St. Louis, I'll get y'all tickets, and y'all can all come to the game. So Christmas, this 1 year, Christmas, we go up there a couple of days early to be with all of her family and get to know them better. And Marla's shopping with Erica's mother and her sister and all for 2 days. And it's the weekend before Christmas. And I know they did a lot of shopping because for the next several days, UPS and FedEx were just delivering stuff to our house constantly. I thought I'd gotten off light because we went back with nothing. And I thought, wow, that's good. I got out of this pretty light. And then the trucks started showing up, and I found out different. But during the game, I knew the girls would be having a big time, having a lot of fun and all this. And I know she's used to all this, so she's not paying any attention to the game or me doing that. Who comes to watch a referee work, you know? So Marla is up there having a good time, I'm sure. And halfway through the first quarter, the Eagles run this deep reverse. My side, or the Rams do, And this Eagle linebacker right in front of me, I'm giving ground for it like I've done 1,000 times before, grabs this little wide receiver who's half his size and spins around with him and throws him out of bounds. And I'd given him plenty of space, but when he throws him out of bounds, his feet actually come off the ground like a little rag doll. And he slings him, and instead of just throwing him straight out of bounds, he throws him back up the sideline where I am. And it all happens so quick that I don't even hardly have any time to react, and I'm a pretty good distance from him. But this is a big man throwing a little man that he's mad at. And I'm able to get my toe just off the ground, but it hits me in my right leg, which is the only leg I'd never had a knee surgery on, so I was not happy about that. But it hits me right below the knee, and it tears my knee up, but it breaks my lower leg. It hits me right from the front. And I think it's like a stinger, like when you hit your shin on a coffee table or something like that. It hurts so bad, but I thought it was like that. So I thought, I'm okay. But I thought, this hurts a little worse. And they punted the next play, and I'm trying to run downfield, and I said, wow, something is really not right. My referee runs up behind, we're going to the TV commercial, and he said, Gary, I've never seen you run like that, man. Something is wrong. You better lay down. So I lay down, and the team trainers come. They stop the game, and they had to bring a cart to take me off to the sideline, to take me to the Rams medical room right there at their locker room. And our lockers were right down the hallway from theirs. But as soon as they put me up on the table, the doctor says, man, your leg is broke. It's definitely broken, and we got to get you fixed up and get you out of here right now. And we're halfway through the first quarter. And we had driven up there because we lived in eastern Arkansas. It was about a 4-hour drive. And he said, are you flying or driving? I said, we're driving. And he said, well, your wife's going to have to drive. We're going to have to splint you up and get you back to your orthopedic surgeon, what's his name, and all this. And because I wanted to go home to have him operate on me. And I said, but go down and get my phone out of the locker room, because I know my wife is worried sick. She's worried sick, so please go get my phone. They go down to the locker room, get my phone out of my locker, bring it back down. I'm up on the table, the x-ray table, and they're trying to splint my leg and all this. And I call her, and the first words out of her, before I could even say anything, of course she sees my name come up on her phone. And the first thing she says is, where are you? I just looked out on the field and you're not even out there. What are you doing? And I said, honey, I've got a broken leg, and I don't know, maybe my knee's torn up too, I don't know. But they're coming up there with security to get you out of your seat and bring you down. We're leaving. Really? We have to leave? We're all up here talking and having a good time. And I said, well, honey, we got to go. We got to go. I got to get this thing worked on. So anyway, they get her. But it was so funny because that was a national broadcast game. It was the big game of the week. She's a teacher, like I said. Well, a lot of people all over the country were watching that game. Her phone starts blowing up with all her friends and her teacher friends and everybody calling her, because this was shown on the news. It was shown on the game and shown at halftime and all this, that this guy's not coming back. His leg's torn up, whatever. So he's not back in the game. So the whole country's seeing it. And she thanks me later and she said, thank goodness you called me, because I'm getting calls like crazy. And if I'd have been the only person in the world that didn't even know anything about it, that would have looked kind of bad, because my friends all knew about it. But we've had a lot of fun about all this stuff together, and a lot of serious times and some interesting times. But our kids, we've got 4 kids and 11 grandkids. And Rhett and Morgan live in Arkansas, and they've got 3 little girls. They're in barrel racing and all this stuff, and they're from 9 years old down to 2. And they're just a great family. And one thing I've been blessed about is all 4, we got 3 boys and 1 girl. All 4 of them found good mates. All 4 of them found good mates. And boy, that's a relief as a parent when they find good mates and good people that are good mates. And all their kids are great kids. We're going, my daughter, after we get back home from here, we're going straight to East Texas. She is a chemistry and biology high school teacher at my old high school. And her son is graduating this weekend, and he's the valedictorian of his class. And then that's Katie. Katie, one time, when she was a little girl, and I was working when Aikman and all that group were playing for the Cowboys, and they were so good, I'd worked their training camp, and I'd said something to Troy. When you're working training camps, you're with them meals, practices, all day for a week. So you get to know them real well. And I told him how much of a crush my daughter, who was probably 13 or 14 years old at the time, but she was getting in that crush state as a little girl. Troy Aikman was like probably every little girl wanted to marry Troy Aikman. Probably half their mamas wanted to too, probably. But Katie had a big crush on Troy, and I said, well, if I have a game there in Dallas, Troy, the kids could kind of come down during warm-ups and stuff and stay on the sideline. Probably now, after all the COVID stuff and terrorism and all that, they won't let them do that stuff anymore. But I said, if Katie ever met you, that would just blow her mind. Well, I had a game, and it was all set up. I set it up with Troy, and he was going to come out early to warm up before all the teams get out there. He's coming out with the kickers, and he does. And I said, Katie will be the little blonde standing over there in front of y'all's bench, and she's probably going to be in awe because she's actually on the field. And she was, and I'm watching her the whole time, and here comes Troy out. Troy was all for it. He said, oh man, I'd like to do this. I'll do this. That's really cute. He comes out. Of course, Troy's about 6'4", 6'5". He's a tall guy. Katie was 13, 14 years old, standing over on the sideline, and she's looking up at the stadium like this. Troy comes up behind her, and so she doesn't see him coming. He comes up behind her, and I'm watching all this thinking this is going to be so cool, so cool. You know, some of my crewmates are watching. We're thinking it's going to be funny. He taps her on the shoulder, and she turns around, and he's right here. So when he turns around, she turns around and has to look straight up like that at him. He reaches out and grabs her hand because what he was going to do, he told me what he was going to do. He said he was going to kiss her hand and say, Katie, I'm so glad I've heard your dad say you're one of my biggest fans, and I sure appreciate you being a fan. Thank you. That's what he was going to do. He grabs her hand, and as he pulls her hand up, she faints. I mean, she hits the ground hard. She dropped so hard, and I'm sitting there saying, oh my gosh, because she slapped her head on the turf, and Troy was trying to catch her, but he couldn't catch her. And she hits the ground, so we had to carry her over to the Cowboys bench. And their medical staff is over there. And I mean, she was out. They're waving this strong stuff under their nose that makes you, if you ever had that done, you ever played and had them stick that under your nose, it will go right to your brain, burns your brain. I mean, it'll wake you up. And she's not moving. I mean, she's really not moving. Troy is sitting there looking at me saying, oh, I'm so sorry, man. I said, Troy, it's not your fault. Anyway, we finally got her revived. It's the most embarrassing story of her life. And she tells, and she had her two brothers on the sideline with her at the time. And they saw it. And they said, well, Katie, and I finally had to tell them, stop doing this to your sister, because they're saying, well, Troy was about to propose to you right there. And what do? You pass out. So that's it. That was your shot, you know, and she's upset and all this. And I said, I threatened the boys' lives. So Katie uses that story with every class that she has. She teaches the seniors that don't ever be, as a teenager, don't ever be embarrassed about anything, because there's nothing you could ever do to be any more embarrassed than I was in this situation. And she always tells that story to them, and they, of course, it wins the whole class over all the time. But Katie also, once when she was a little girl, and you ladies out here, I hope you can appreciate this. It put me on the spot. I was going down to work A&M and LSU at at A&M this weekend for a college game. And it was going to be on big TV and all that on Saturday night. And I was leaving Friday afternoon to fly down there. And Katie comes bouncing out of the house. And I'm headed to the Memphis airport. And she comes bouncing out of the house. Of course, the boys were always more involved because they were the boys, you know. And then what she was able, it was harder to take her by herself. But she comes bouncing out of the house. And this is when she was little. And I said, yeah, honey, I'm already backing my truck out. And here she comes out of the back door. I said, yeah, honey, what is it? She runs right up to the truck. And I opened the door and I looked down at her and I put my arm around her. I said, what is it, baby? And she said, Dad, when you're at the game, is this game on, like, we call it big TV because it's the main game. And I said, yeah, tomorrow night. It'll be on TV here. She said, oh, okay. She said, could you do something during the game that I would know you're thinking about me? You're thinking about me. And I said, during the game? And she said, yeah, during the game. And I said, well, now I'm trying to think, what in the world can I tell her? And I said, I just happened to think all at once. I said, well, honey, you'll know I'm thinking about you. She said, could you wave at me or something? That's what she said. And I said, you'll know when I'm thinking about you because I'll wave at you with both hands, like this. So you'll know I'm thinking about Katie. And she said, oh, really? I said, you'll be able to see that, right? Yeah, she said, I want something I can see. And I said, you should be able to see this. Well, I get back home late Sunday. And as soon as I drive up, she comes out the back door, and I open the door, and she said, I watched the game, and you were thinking about me a lot the whole time. And to this day, with all the big games at work and all these different things, and you know, she's in her mid-40s now, and she'd always laugh, and she'll tell me, she said, yeah, Dad, I didn't have any clue what that really was, but you know, between us, I still thought, as long as you officiated, that I always thought about us at that time. Even as a grown woman, I always thought, he's thinking about me right now. And I said, well, honey, the truth is, because we made that pact and because I was so desperate to think of anything, I actually do think about you almost every time I do it. That I wonder if Katie's watching me. But now the last one I will just mention is our oldest son, Brent, was a Marine Special Forces leader, Force Recon all the way through the second war with Iraq when they went into Baghdad and they were there for so many trips over. He did multiple trips over. But their unit that he was in, that Special Forces unit, was the tip of the sword. And I mean the tip. When they went up that highway from all the way into Baghdad. And for about 3 days solid, he never went to sleep. But his unit was going up there fighting the hard fight. And he did that for 13 years until he was hurt so bad. And he's recovered mostly now. But he was hurt so bad that he had to be sent home and was never able to do that kind of work again. But he did some teaching of Special Forces stuff to different officers, to different groups all over the world. So there's a long time during that period he's going back and forth that we didn't see him. We didn't see him, and it would be sometimes years, and we never knew where he was because most everything he did was secret. And I don't think we'd seen him for over 2 years, and then suddenly this happened, and I'll tell you the front end of the story first. Without us knowing, it was close to Christmas, and I had a game at the end of the season with Denver and San Francisco in San Francisco on Monday Night Football, and it was right at Christmas time. And I think Christmas was a few days after that. And he was in Guam with a bunch of officers and these colonels and a bunch of guys they were trying to teach special forces tactics to, and he was the guy teaching. And he did such a good job with it, of course I didn't even know he was there, that the colonel shuts it off early. They finished the training, he shuts it off early and says, Slaughter, his base was in Hawaii. He said, you can go home, whatever you want to do. I'm going to send everybody home early so everybody can maybe get a chance to go home a day for Christmas or something like that, or wherever they need to go. And he said, well, I know my dad is working this week. He always knew my schedule, and he's going to be in California. He's not going to be home at Christmas. And he said, well, why is he not home at Christmas? What kind of work does he do? And all this. And he said, the rest of the guys are leaving. And he said, well, he's a referee in the NFL, and he's working the Monday night game. And he said, he's working the Denver Broncos versus the 49ers game in San Francisco. And he said, yeah, he's working that. And he said, the Broncos are my favorite team. I grew up there. That's my home, and I've got season tickets and all this. And he said, we're hoping they go to the Super Bowl this year because John Elway was playing. He was playing great. They were great. And he said, we think this is going to be our year. As it turned out, it was. So he said, well, man, can't you let me go there or whatever? You're not going to go home? He said, no, I might as well go back to my base in Hawaii because I won't probably have time for that, and I don't have any way of getting there anyway. And he comes back in the next morning with his orders, and he would get things like this just out of the blue. They'd come in with orders. He had a special place he had to go. He had to go on this mission. It was immediate, and he'd go. He'd never think about it. So he puts it on his bunk. Everybody else has left. He said, Slaughter, I got a mission for you, just for you. It's right up your alley. And we need you to do it like right now. And he said, okay, just put it on the bed. He said, no, I want you to open it. I want you to see what you're doing. And so he opens it. And all those guys had gone together and gotten him tickets to fly to San Francisco and then fly back to Hawaii after. So they got the whole trip taken care of for him. And he said, are you serious? And they said, we're serious. It's all taken care of. Nothing you can do except go. We want you to be with your dad. So we're in San Francisco on Sunday afternoon having our pregame conference, which is about a 3-hour meeting the day before the game. It's that way for every NFL game. So we're in the meeting room at the Marriott Hotel, and all at once there's a knock on the door. And the hotel staff knows not to disturb us for that 3 hours. And they won't. But somebody beats on the conference room door, and our referee, Bill Levy, he said, Gary, you're sitting closest to the door. Go see who the numbskull hotel staff is. Why are they beating on the door? And so I get up out of my seat and I go to the door and open it. And this is just like him to do stuff like this. Surprise. He loves surprises. I opened the door. I hadn't seen him in 2.5 years. And he's standing there. Hey, Dad, what's going on? Just like that. And I sit there and I almost, like Katie, I almost faint. And he comes in. Of course, the whole crew's going crazy. I'm still in a stupor. Just I can't believe it. And he goes on the sideline with, so he goes, they give him a sideline pass, and he stands behind me the entire game. He goes up and down the sideline with me. He's right there with me the whole game. They retired Joe Montana's jersey that night. Jerry Rice breaks another umpteenth record that he breaks. But it's just, that was him. But that colonel, I said, how in the world did this happen? And he says, this Colonel Duarte, I'd never met him. He pulled all this off. And I said, where does he live? I gotta do something for this guy. So I get his name and everything, and anyway, I call him. And I told him, I heard that you're a big Broncos fan. He said, oh yeah, I worked that game you were. How'd you think about Brent showing up, and all that? And he was thrilled to do it all. And I said, man, I'm going to pay you back somehow. And I said, I heard you tried to get Super Bowl tickets. He said, I'm a season ticket holder, and they had an allotment draw. and we didn't get the allotment. So many tickets for the teams that are going, and at the time they don't even know they're going. And I said, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do for you. I said, I understand you've got a son. He said, yeah, I've got a son. He's a teenager, and when I'm not there, he and his friends use my tickets to go to the games. So he actually is excited about it. And I said, well, if Denver goes, I'm going to get you tickets for you and your sons to go. I'm going to get you 4 tickets, and they're going to be good tickets. And he said, no, you don't have to do that, man. I said, hey, you don't know what you did for me. I'm doing this for you. And as it worked out, Denver went to the Super Bowl. And I got the tickets for him, and his brother took his son, they're the same age, and he took his son. And all 4 of them went to the Super Bowl. They had family that lived down there, so they didn't even have to worry about a hotel. And they all had a big time, and I got pictures, hundreds of pictures from him and his friend and his brother and their sons. So that was great. And there was just nothing like it. It's one of the things, I don't remember that many plays out of all those years I worked. I don't have any reason to remember them. You work 45,000 plays in a season. So unless it's something I missed, you always remember those. You remember these family things and all those. And those are the things that meant the most to me. Now, Brent happened to get home after his surgeries and everything, and I was working Dallas and Chicago in Dallas on Thanksgiving Day. And it's the first week or so he's been out of the hospital and there, and he's walking with a cane. And the TV crew that's working those games always invites the officials and their families because everybody's away from home for Thanksgiving for those games. So they have a big, huge Thanksgiving spread for all their technicians, cameramen, the announcers, everybody, 100 and something people, and they invite the officials and their crew to come too. So they divide us up, and we're sitting at the different tables with different people because they don't want all the officials sitting in one area and the TV people everywhere else. So they split us up, and they split us up. Marlon and I and Brent, that was with us, are sitting there with Troy Aikman. He was new as an announcer, Joe Buck, and Chris Collingsworth. They had all 3 of them there. And we're at the table with them, and we're talking about all this stuff. And they want to know, why has Brent got a cane? What's the story with that? And we tell him about the Marines and the whole 9 yards. And they were having a special salute to all the veterans and the military and everything for Thanksgiving at Cowboy Stadium. So they got guys from Fort Hood. They're covering up the field for halftime with military people. And they tell him the whole story of what he could tell that wasn't stuff that he couldn't tell. He told them, and he said, the fact that your dad's an official for the game and you're here and what you've been through and what you've done, we'd like to tell this story on TV. So don't know when we can work it in, but we're going to try to. If we get a chance, we're going to work it in. Well, the next day in the game, now I'm working the game, Brent's down on the sideline. We have no idea what they're saying on TV. Well, they get an injury in the 3rd quarter, and they decide not to go to commercial, and Chris Collingsworth starts talking. He circles me on the field, which I didn't know anything about, and he talks about Brent and them having dinner with us the night before, and talks all about this on the air. And he's been in the Marines for 13 years and all this kind of stuff, and it was quite a speech, but none of us knew anything about it. We had no clue. Only till we get a tape of the game afterwards do we even find out. But Chris tells a very heartwarming story on the air with the biggest telecast of the season is Thanksgiving Day, usually with the Cowboys. We leave the game not having known any of it. But his unit, just by coincidence, this has been several years now, is coming in from the field. They've been out. They're working from the Al-Assad Air Base up on the Syrian border. And they're out all night long looking for IEDs, trying to do something about that problem. And they come in at 5 a.m. back to the air base because they've been gone all night, and they're doing this every night. Very dangerous work. And they come back in. The air base is all set up, and they have a big mess hall there with TVs, big screens up. What's on TV? at a way different time zone is the Cowboy game with Chicago. And they come in and get settled in, have breakfast, and then they go to bed. And there it is on the screen. They start talking about their sergeant and his dad, and they hear the whole 9 yards. So we're at the hotel, and we get a phone call from the Assad Air Base. And it's his whole unit. And they're all there together. And they can't believe what they've just seen on TV. But guys being guys, all you guys understand this, is you're busting on each other. The guys will bust on each other. And right off the bat, he puts it on speaker and said, Dad, you're not going to believe this. This is my unit. This is my unit overseas calling me right now. And they said, hey, man, we thought when we hauled you out of that mess that we got into that you were hurt real bad. But if you can go over to Dallas and you can have dinner with Troy Aikman and all these guys the night before the game and you're hanging out at the game, you need to get your butt back over here with us. So it's just those stories like that that I think are just so tremendous and the things I remember the most. I'll tell you just quickly, and I know because I've talked almost too long, but I want to get to the faith part. Everybody always asks me, how in the world do you get in the NFL? Well, everybody goes through the same procedure. You're scouted, just like they scout players. And I remember working Texas and Oklahoma at the fairgrounds during the Texas State Fair. And right before we walked out on the field, I get a knock at the door. I mean, we're going out for the coin toss. And they're both rated in the top 5 at the time and all this. And it's a big game. And I get a knock on the locker room door. And somebody says, hey, Gary, there's a guy here who wants to talk to you. And I said, who would be wanting to talk to me? All my family's in the stands. Did somebody get hurt or is there a problem? And they said, no. It's a guy. He's got on a sport coat, sharp-looking dude. He just wants to say hello. I thought, who in the world could this be? And I go to the door. I said, all right, I'll go to the door. And I go to the door, and, I mean, we're ready to go out. And he sticks his hand out and smiles and said, hey, Gary, I'm Joe Blow with the NFL officiating department. I'm here to scout you today for the Texas OU game. Have a good look. Have a good game. Then he walks away. And I'm sitting there saying, what? What? Well, as it turns out, that guy had probably seen me over a 3-year period multiple times. That's the first time I'd ever seen him face to face. And they'd done that. They do that with everybody. They scout you. And if you get high on the list, they scout you even more. And I meet the man the year I come in to the NFL, which was the next year. And he told me that he'd seen me 13 times. And I said, why did you come to the door like that? And he said, because I'd seen you from the press box. He said, 2 weeks before, I saw you at that LSU A&M game that I was talking about with my daughter. And LSU had a coach that's a real problem. And I stood on the sideline right behind you the whole game. Walked up and down. I wanted to hear your conversation with him the whole game because I knew he's going to be yapping all the time. So I wanted to see how you handled him. You handled him fine. I said, so why in person that day? He said, well, I had a track record of you for 3 years. So I wanted to put extra pressure on you right before the big game of the year for you. And I wanted to see if you acted any different than the other 13 times I'd seen you. And he said, I said, well, so how'd that go? He said, what do you think? You're in the league. I'm talking to you right now. You know, we hired you. So that's kind of the way we scout people all the time. But we're getting ready to start the new year right now. I'm putting training material together for our guys, lots of film of what we did well, what we didn't from last year. And we have that in New York in the first week of June. Everybody has to go through that. They go through a very rigorous physical test because they run on average about 6.5, 7 miles per game, each official on the field. They prepare every week. They have to go through their game and look at every graded play. We grade every play of every game. So if they make a mistake, if something they called was wrong or something they should have called that they didn't call, goes into their record for that game and really their whole career under their number. Like I said, I was always number 30, so it'd go under mine. You could go back and look at mine even today and know every call I made, whether it was right or not. But you go through that, they go through that game, then they start preparing for the two teams that they're working that week. And that's one of the things I help them with. Both of the teams of all 17 crews with 7 officials on each crew that we get ready for that weekend. So that's what they go through, and that's how it determines your grades, whether you get a contract the next year or not, whether you get a playoff game or not, and then the top people that scored the best all year get the Super Bowl. But to get to the faith part, most all the crews have a devotional because, like in college, you're gone on the weekend. So you're missing a lot of church. And two of the, we go through these tests, psychological tests, and one of the biggest things that they look for is, of course, if you're a family man, you're a good man or woman, and one of the top characteristics they want is your empathy or your humility that you have for other people. Your humility for yourself, your empathy for other people. And it's big in the way they evaluate you is how you do on that part of the test. Because you're going to be with those same group of people every week for that whole season. It may change the next year, but you're with them every week for 18 weeks plus the preseason, postseason, all that. So it's a lot. But every crew, mostly that I'm with on the weekends, has a devotional on Sunday morning. You come in on Saturday, you do all your preparation, your final preparation for the game on Saturday afternoon at the hotel. Sunday morning, you're there 3 hours before game time and focused on all that. But before we leave the hotel, we almost entirely, there may be an exception every once in a while, but they have their devotional because you're missing church. And when I first started in the league, they didn't have all this stuff on the computers that you could have. So we'd get up early and go to a Catholic church in Philadelphia, New York, somewhere, and we'd be up on the front row. It looked strange, 7 men at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning in a Catholic church in some big city somewhere, in NFL city. And everybody would know who it was because we all shared this is a good church to go to. So all the crews would do it. But there's so many funny things that happen, I could go forever, but I know I've got to stop. But the last thing I want to mention is when I got hired to come off the field and go to work in management full-time for the league, that first year, I had to be in New York every week. So Marla and I had moved from Arkansas, small towns, to Dallas. That was like going, well, for her, I remember she cried. And she cried about the toll roads, and that was the end of the ones where you had to stop and have the money and go through all that. She said, I don't know how to do all that. I'll probably just stay at home. Well, I was having to go straight into work, and this is how our week would go. We're building a house in Dallas because she couldn't find one with a kitchen like she wanted, and she only had 5 recipes, so I didn't know why it was such a big deal that this kitchen had to be so perfect. But it was, so we wound up having to build a house after looking at 100 of them. And I would have to, the way the week would go, I would go to a game, fly to a game on Saturday morning. We're building the home, and she just started teaching there. And after the game was over, I'd fly straight to New York, to Park Avenue, where the New York offices are, because you had to be there to grade the games and do all that in the command center. She'd work there all the way through Thursday to grade every play of every game, the ones of us who were the supervisors, and all the supervisors were very successful officials when they were on the field. And we'd do that, so I'd fly home, get in at midnight in Dallas on Thursday night, be home one day, Friday, get to see her, meet with the builder, try to see what they needed to redo, all that kind of stuff. Fly to another game, do the same thing, that whole cycle the whole year. And lived in New York. While I was in New York, we stayed at the Yale Club. It was just down the street from the office because Commissioner had a contact there, so we'd stay there. So that was a big adjustment for both of us. You're leaving towns that you'd known, your barber, your hairdresser, your dentist, your eye doctor. You'd known everybody for years, decades. Suddenly you're in a new town, and of course, when we were there were only like 3 churches in our town. So you had a Church of Christ, but you always had a First Baptist. I didn't know there was another kind of Baptist. First Baptist, and I taught up until I started traveling all the time. Senior boys Sunday school class, and was in the choir. But I was on the back row of the choir, and they told me to sing the soft parts. Don't sing any of the big parts, for a good reason. But this is when I started feeling, because until the season was over, there's no chance for us to go to a church. And for us, I could feel it in my soul that we were drifting. She was feeling it too. We were drifting. Season was over. We tried to go to different churches, just trying to find a place. We didn't know anybody, all that, so you're just trying to go and find. And we'd go to these churches sometimes, and you know what I'm talking about. You go in, they preach a service and make you feel real, real good, and the world is great, and everything's great, and you leave, and you're supposed to feel great. And it's really not teaching the Bible. It's not teaching God's Word straight out. It's kind of bending things a little to fit your life and the message where they don't want to insult anybody or make anybody feel bad when they leave the church. And that didn't go good for us. We were both raised by 2 World War II military leaders, our dads. Hers was an A&M Corps, commanded troops in the Battle of the Bulge. Mine was in the Army. He came up through North Africa and Anzio, one of the bloodiest battles ever, and all the way up through Italy. And that's the kind of men we were raised with. You didn't cry about anything. You could pray to God, but it's like He's busy with a lot of the problems besides yours. We were supposed to do everything and take care of ourselves. You're supposed to pull your pants up and get over it. Don't cry. Do something about it. Whatever it is. And that's kind of the way that is the way we were raised. But that big life change, it took a little while because we're so busy, especially maybe me, so busy, that it takes a while to catch up with you to realize that you're off track and that you're not getting the guidance, the closeness, the personal walk that you need to have, and you're losing it. I was baptized when I was 12, and I never questioned my salvation. Never questioned that. But I knew I was not walking with the Lord like I should be. I knew I was not growing as a Christian as I should be. And there were a lot of other things that I needed to do. And I never dreamed I would be standing in front of a crowd like this talking about this type of thing. Maybe about football, explain that, but not about our faith. So it worked on both of us. We came up to a real hard part of life where we were losing both of our parents. Our parents were passing away. Mine had already passed away. Hers were beginning to. And we had talked about it and said, this year, when the season's over, we got to do something about this. We got to get serious every week. If we have to go every week somewhere else, we got to find a place. So it was getting to the end of that season. Her dad was about to pass away. She's going to Arkansas. I'm not done with the season. It's right at Christmas. And I remember it like it was yesterday. She went home to be with him because she figured it's the last Christmas he was going to have. I was home by myself, and just by total coincidence, all our children were at their in-laws for Christmas. It was just one of those Christmases where they all were there. And so I was the only one that was at home by myself. And true story, somebody did some work that Christmas like a preacher would ask them to do. I've got this big stack of these cards. Go put them on people's doors to tell them to come to our Christmas service. Well, somebody has to do that. And our preacher all the time teaches us to step up. Hey, you just don't show up and just go to church every week and that's it. You got to get in there and do something. You're supposed to go to work for the Lord. And somebody, I wish I knew who it was, Because I'd been alone for about 2 or 3 days. I knew I was fixing to fly out to another city for a game. Knew Marla wouldn't be home for a while. If he went real bad, she'd have to stay. And then all the kids were gone to in-laws, and I wouldn't see them for Christmas. My daughter called me. She was so upset. Dad, you're going to be home alone. And I said, well, one of the days, honey, I'm going to watch 3 movies like Mission Impossible and something else and something else. I'm going to eat at 3 different places just to not be bored. And then I got to go to the game, afterwards. But I'm going to be okay. Don't worry about it. Quit crying. Don't worry about it. Well, somebody put that card in my door. I'm open to go get the mail. And that card falls down on the front porch. And I looked at it. I said, Cottonwood Creek Church. I said, that's the exit I've been taking for the last several years to come home from DFW to my house. They're right off the freeway. And I said, well, it's right there. I might as well go. So I went to hear the Christmas service. They're going to have like 4 or 5 of them one day. I hear the service, and this guy comes out. His name's John Mark Caton. And I'd heard that service, the Christmas message, seemed like, dozens and dozens of times. But that day, it was like my soul and my heart was hurting. And it was hurting pretty bad. But it was like we probably had 1,500, 2,000 people in the service. And it was like Brother Mark and me were sitting in there by ourselves. And he was doing like my dad would do if I got in trouble about something. He'd thump me to give me a message that I needed. It's like, you need to pay attention what I'm saying right now. And it felt like the whole time he's thumping me right in the back of the head, just like my dad would. And I was listening. And that service finished. And I didn't know if it felt good or felt bad. It's hard to tell with my heart how it was feeling, but I think this is all I need to hear. I need to hear to step up and quit making excuses just because I'm gone all this time, and I need to do something about this and now. And I said, I'm coming back to the next service just to see if this is really what I thought it was. So I just stayed, went to the next service too. I called Marla that night. You remember it, honey. I called you and I said, I think I found our church. I found our church. And it's where we are now. And I talked to our men's group that meets at 6 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday. So that fits my schedule. I got no excuses. 6 o'clock in the morning every Tuesday to be at that service with a lot of other men. And it's been the greatest thing in the world for me, and how involved we are in the church. And like during the off season, we're in there all the time. But I got no excuses on Tuesday because I'm not going to New York all the time now. I'm not on that schedule anymore now. And I would just encourage you. And there was one little family that I wanted to tell you about. I knew when I got into the NFL this was strange because I worked with military contracts for this company. And it was my rookie year, and I was going down to Miami to meet with a lot of officers on these government contracts that we were working on. And I just worked a game in Green Bay 3 weeks before, my first trip to Green Bay. And Green Bay, I loved going there I loved September and October. That's when I loved to go there. But this couple sitting on the Hertz rental bus, they were probably in their 70s then, from my age then, and they looked just like a beautiful little couple. Their name was Frank and Ethel. The only difference would have been Fred and Ethel. It would have been like Fred and Ethel Burts for you guys that remember them from that old TV show. But here they are in middle October, and they're in Miami, and they're on the shuttle bus with me, and they're right across from me, and they've got on Green Bay gear, head to toe, caps, shirts, the whole 9 yards, both of them. They're sitting right across from me. And I just smiled at them because they're both in their 70s. And I said, well, obviously y'all are Green Bay fans, but you're down here in Miami. And I said, what are you in Miami for? And they said, well, we've got our first grandbaby. We've been waiting for this forever. Now we got our first grandbaby, so we're coming down here. And it doesn't matter where we go, we're wearing the Packer green and gold. Doesn't matter where. We want our grandbaby to see this. We've got him a bunch of stuff in the bag here, Packer stuff. And I said, well, that's great. It's a great franchise. And all. They said, yeah, we've been season ticket holders for 30, 40 years now. And in Green Bay, it's hard to get a season ticket. When a baby's born, they need to put them on the list because they don't give their tickets away to other fans, to other teams. They hang on to them, and it's hard. Maybe by the time that child, if they put them on the list when they're born, by the time they get to be an adult, they might be able to purchase season tickets. That's how hard it is. And it's true. It's hard to get season tickets there. And so they're telling me about all this, and I notice they're whispering to each other the whole time. And I'm getting a little uncomfortable about it because they keep looking at me. And I have nothing on with the NFL. I have nothing on a bag, nothing that says anything about the NFL. I'm going down there on my business, real business. And she said, can we ask you a question? And I said, sure, I guess so. It'd been silent for a few minutes, and they said, are you by chance an NFL official? I said, wow, what would even make you ask that? And they said, well, I told Frank here, this is Ethel talking, I told Frank that I think that guy worked a game at Green Bay about 3 weeks ago. And it's the first time we'd ever seen you, if you're who we think you are. And I said, well, ma'am, I'm down here on business with government contract stuff, you know. And she said, yeah, but I know y'all all have other jobs, but we think you were there and they were actually playing Miami. And I just couldn't believe it. And she said, it's true, isn't it? And you're a rookie, because we'd never seen you before. And I said, I got to tell you, y'all seem pretty safe, so yes, you're not gamblers, right? And they said, no, we're not gamblers. And I said, so yeah, I actually did. They said, we can't remember your number, but it was 2, and you started out on the 2 numbers, you started out on our sideline. And I said, yeah, I started out on Green Bay sideline. They said, that's where our tickets are. And Puncher said, Ethel, just go ahead and tell him what you do, what you've been doing for 40 years. And she said, well, I have this book. She pulls it out of her purse. And she opens the book up, and she says, I rate all the officials in the league. And I have the ones I like, and she opens the page, and that I've liked for 40 years. And then I keep the current ones in different colors, but I have the current ones now, but I can go back 40 years and tell you the ones I liked and the ones I didn't, you know. And then we have the others that are kind of like you, that we haven't seen but once, and we hadn't decided yet as to where you are. And she said, so here you are. We found out about your name. You're Gary Slaughter, right? And I said, yeah, that's weird. Yes, I am. She said, well, so what's your number? We know it's 2 numbers. I said, 30. That's 30. So she writes it in her book right then. Okay, I've got it. So we'll be watching every time you come back to Green Bay and keep up with you from there. So I can't wait. I know they're already there. I could tell by that couple that they're in heaven. They're in heaven. They've been there a while by now. But I can't wait till my time comes. When I go to the pearly gates and I'm right there in front of St. Peter, right in front of St. Peter, I'm going to ask him. I'm going to say, I gotta see Frank and Ethel. I know they're here somewhere, and I know they're wearing their green and gold, but I got to see Ethel's book to see if I ever got to the good list, if I ever made the good list. So think about that, and think about your own challenge to yourself. I know there's a lot of really good people in this room, and obviously being a part of this group, that I know you're spiritual and all that, but think about challenge yourself. Is there more I could do? Is there something I could do to further the kingdom? Is there something I could do to grow myself? Because it's never too late. No matter how old we get or what our situation is, we can always do more. So thank you very much for having me tonight. I know it's run late. If anybody has questions, I'll stay and answer questions.
All right. Gary, thank you very much. Gary's going to stick around. If you want to ask some questions, I'm going to ask him one question, then we're going to dismiss. Tell us one time, as the head linesman, he's right on the sideline, either the home team or the visitor. And guess who's right beside him? The whole coaching staff, usually the head coach.
Yep.
In his ear. How about one time when somebody we might have heard of got in your face? Maybe a big man who at one time was a tight end for the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, Mike Ditka.
Yeah, that's the one.
Mike Ditka. And it's funny, I get asked this all the time about people who say, which was the hardest or worst coaches to work for? And the things that they think, like Parcells or maybe other people they might think were my favorite ones, is because we had an understanding and we got along good. Now, you get challenged, but it was my first time to work in front of Mike Ditka. And this is when Mike Ditka had heart surgery. He'd had a heart surgery because he could get pretty angry. And it was funny what he might say when he got angry, unless it was to you. But Mike had heart surgery, and he was with the Saints now, and he was supposed to be the kinder, gentler Mike Ditka. And I'm working his sideline for the first game, and it's at the end of the first half, and it's a critical down where they've got to pick up this first down, and the receiver runs downfield, and he comes back real hard right at the first down marker in about a tight 45-degree angle. He catches the ball low to the sideline, and the NFL rule is different from college and high school that when you hit the ground, you're not down until you're touched, unless you just give yourself up, but you've got to be touched by the defender. So this guy's coming back right in front of Mike, standing on the sideline, and they need this first down to get one more score before the half. And I'm judging it. So the receiver catches the ball low to the ground, and he's sliding on his belly, and as he's sliding, he's coming back at about a 60-degree angle hard to the sideline. So he's not down. Nobody's touched him yet, and as he's sliding with all that momentum, he's probably going to slide out of bounds. Well, Ditka would want to stop the clock so he wouldn't have to use his last time out. But the defender chasing him, not only does he slide, he caught it beyond the first down, but as he's sliding, he's now short of the first down, just as he's about to go out of bounds, sliding on his belly. And his feet are kind of up, and the defensive back was smart. Just before he goes out of bounds, he reaches up and slaps his heels, which now makes him down. So now he's short of the first down that he needed, so now you're going to fourth. And he touched him in bounds, so the clock is running. So he has to use his last time out, and it's going to fourth down. So I'm not going to repeat what he said. But he said, you really messed me around two different ways, but it messed me around is not what he said. Two different ways on one play. I've never seen a guy screw up two things in one play like this, like you've done. And he went crazy. And we're nose to nose. And this wound up making all the media and internet and all that stuff. I found 4 friends that I hadn't heard from in 30 years because they saw this. And they didn't know I worked for the NFL. I called my mother and said, hey, is Gary working for the NFL? Saw this thing with him and Mike Ditka. When Mike started screaming at me, I knew I had to tell him, you better call timeout because the clock's running and you're going to run out while you're screaming at me. And he's right in my nose, and he's about that much taller than me, so his mouth is right even with my eyes. And he would chew about 4 pieces of gum at one time and have it like a chaw, but it's gum. And as he's screaming at me for missing this, I'm trying to calm him down a little because he's the calmer, gentler Mike, and he's had heart surgery. I didn't want him to keel over in front of me. The gum comes out of his mouth and hits me right in the eye. I mean, hard, because he's screaming. It hits me right in the eye, and I squint like that. I can't believe it. And I squint like it, and I said, oh, come on, coach, like that. And he realizes what he's done, and it's kind of stunned him too. So he just reaches out and grabs me by both shoulders. He said, they all know your name. So he said, oh, Gary, dude, I'm so sorry about that. I'm so sorry about that. Are you all right? And I can't see, but I said, yeah, I'll be all right. And I started to say, but you need to, and before I could do that, he suddenly, after being so nice and asking me, am I all right, like a real caring guy, he goes right back to being berserk. As soon as I said, yeah, I'm okay, he goes crazy again. And it's all caught on film. It's all caught on TV. And later he asked me, he said, "You going to write me up?" Because anytime we have a conversation like that, the league wants to know it because they might find the coach. I might have flagged him, so they had to know why I flagged him, what he said. And you got to put verbatim down on that report. And then they're going to call him and verify and all that. And they may fine him, they may suspend him. So he comes up to me and asks me right before we're going to half, because second half he knows I'm going to the other side of the field. So I'm not going to be over there for us to kiss and make up or anything. If I'm mad, I'm still going to be mad when I leave him for the second half. So they don't want to do that. And he said, "Are you going to write me up in a game report?" And I said, "No, I'm not going to write you up." I said, "I don't do that." We didn't go that far. I said, "I didn't have to flag you. We're okay. I'm beginning to see." And he said, "You're not going to?" And I said, "No." I said, "Because you're the kinder, gentler Mike now. And I don't want to do that to you." And I said, "We're all right. I'll be fine. We'll be fine. We're fine." And he said, "Well, I appreciate that, because I'm not going to be fine with my cardiologist and my wife, because I'm sure this whole thing got caught on TV."
All right.
Thank you.
Come up and see Gary after. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.